All right, let's dive into the story of an organization that started out as a small church ministry and kind of quietly grew into one of the biggest, most powerful players in American senior living. This is the incredible 50-year journey of Axe Retirement.
So let's just start with a number to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about here. As of 2024, Axe Retirement Life Communities controls over $2.7 billion in assets. Yeah. This isn't just some small nonprofit, it is a financial heavyweight with a balance sheet like a fortress.
But it's not just about the money, it's about the people. Axe serves over 11,000 residents across 28 communities in 9 different states. That is a massive human footprint.
So this is the big question, right? How in the world did they do it? How does a faith-based mission, literally an act of faith, turn into a multi-billion-dollar, super-regional powerhouse? Well, the story starts way back in the early 1970s.
Okay, Section 1, an act of faith. It all began not with some fancy business plan, but with a simple, really profound vision for a better way to care for the elderly.
To really get their vision, you have to kind of picture what things were like back then. The term retirement living, as we know it, it barely existed. For most people, getting old meant ending up in an institutional nursing home, which was seen as a place of decline, not a vibrant community.
And the motivation behind this is absolutely key. Reverend Richard Coons, a pastor in Pennsylvania, he saw this problem not through a business lens, but a spiritual one. For him and his church, creating a better option wasn't about real estate. It was a mission, a theological imperative.
So, in 1972, they did it. They opened their very first community, right next to the church. Fort Washington Estates became the lab for their new idea. Apartment-style homes where people could live on their own, but, and this is the important part, with the peace of mind that higher levels of care were right there on campus if they ever needed it. The demand? It was immediate and totally overwhelming. All right, Section 2, building the blueprint. So that early success led to a huge decision. Do we stay small, or do we build a blueprint to do this again and again? Well, they chose to build, kicking off a phase that turned them from a local ministry into a real regional force. The early expansion strategy was honestly brilliant. First, in the 70s, they built what they called a ring of security, just a cluster of communities around Philadelphia. Super smart for operational efficiency. Then in '83, they made a big pivot, following retirees south to Florida. But they didn't stop there. By 1988, they noticed another trend, retirees moving halfway back from Florida to be closer to family. So boom, they opened a community in North Carolina just for them. And by 2001, they were building brand new places from the ground up in Georgia. Every single move was deliberate and really strategic. Okay, Section 3, from builder to buyer. By the 2000s, the game was starting to change. Land was getting way more expensive, and building from scratch was getting harder. So, under new leadership, Axe made another huge pivot. They went from being a builder to a buyer.
And their white knight model is perfectly shown with this one. Back in 2005, a standalone community in Alabama was going bankrupt, which was happening a lot to smaller providers. Axe swooped in, bought the facility, renamed it Magnolia Trace, and just poured in the capital to turn it around. This proved they could not only build, but they could rescue, integrate, and basically export their culture to existing communities. This was a huge sign of things to come for the whole nonprofit sector. This whole acquisition strategy led to a game-changing move in 2010. They affiliated with another nonprofit system, Peninsula United Methodist Homes. This one deal brought a whole portfolio of communities in Delaware and Maryland into the Axe family, and almost overnight pushed them past the $1 billion asset mark. Their scale had just completely changed.
Okay, Section 4, the Axe secret sauce. So you might be wondering, how in the world can they afford to do all this? How do they stay so stable while making these huge moves? Well, that brings us to the financial and cultural engine of their success, what I like to call the Axe secret sauce.
It all starts with their core product, something called the Life Care Contract. Now, this is more than just a housing agreement, it's basically a financial insurance product. Residents pay a pretty significant one-time entrance fee, and in exchange, their monthly fee is locked in. So, if they later need more expensive assisted living or nursing care, their main monthly bill doesn't suddenly skyrocket. So the promise to the resident is really simple, but it is incredibly powerful. You're essentially prepaying for your future long-term care, which removes the biggest financial unknown of getting older. The risk of needing, say, 10 years of expensive care is carried by the entire ACT system, not by you as an individual. It's a promise of predictability and, honestly, peace of mind.
Now here's how they back that promise up financially.
They use a structure called an obligated group. Think of it like this. Instead of each of their 28 communities being its own little financial island, they're all bundled together. The assets and revenues of the entire system are used to back each other up. The strength of the whole group supports every single part.
So why does that matter? Well, because this massive, diversified portfolio gives them incredible financial strength. It lets them maintain an A- credit rating from Fitch, which, trust me, is elite in this sector. This means when they need to borrow money for a big expansion or an acquisition, they get it at really good interest rates, giving them a huge, huge competitive advantage.
But you know, the secret sauce isn't just financial. It's also cultural. Coming from their faith-based roots, the entire organization operates under this official philosophy of loving kindness. It's a real behavioral framework that sets the standard for every single interaction between staff and residents. All right, Section 5, Shaping the Future. This brings us right up to the present day, where ACTS isn't just a player in the senior living industry, they are actively shaping its future through consolidation and adaptation. A perfect example of their ability to adapt came just a few years ago, in 2020. They rebranded a super successful community in North Carolina. Why? They acknowledged that the name Plantation Estates had negative racial connotations. So, after a vote by residents and staff, they renamed it Matthews Glen. It was such a clear signal that they're committed to being an inclusive community for the next generation.
And their growth has only accelerated. We've really entered what you could call the era of mega-affiliations. In just the last few years, they've absorbed entire systems in Maryland, adding deep clinical expertise, and they've kept up their strategic expansion in Florida, adding unique high-rise and Gulf Coast communities. They are a primary force driving the consolidation of the nonprofit sector.
The scorecard for 2024 is, well, it's staggering. Over $2.7 billion in assets, almost $750 million in annual revenue, and look at that occupancy rate, 95.6%. In an industry where a lot of places struggle to break 90, that shows incredible demand. But the most crucial part, to me, is that last line. They still provided $2.7 million in benevolent care, proving that even at this massive scale, they're still committed to that original mission of caring for residents who outlive their money.
Which leaves us with one final, really crucial question. The silver tsunami of baby boomers is here, and they're demanding more and better options for aging. After 50 years of methodical growth and strategic adaptation, what is the role and the responsibility of a nonprofit giant like ACTS in defining what it means to grow old in America? That's the story they're writing right now.